Hello, my name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. This is Writing is brought to you by mjgstorycreation.com. Go to mjgstorycreation.com for helpful tips on how to turn your idea into an epic story today. We are finally here. Act 4. Act 4 is E, and E is for evolution. This is probably one of the more exciting acts because we're bringing everything to a close, but as far as the message is concerned, you as the writer have a final opportunity to impart to your audience just how important your message is. So let's get to it. Now, if you remember from yesterday, our character accepted responsibility before they went to the 6th bookend, which means that they have a plan of some sort. But you can be guaranteed that that plan involves other people. This is not a case of them going it alone. It doesn't work that way. So when we come from the 7th bookend, we also realize that hustle matters. So not only should this 7th bookend communicate the state of the world, but there should be some urgency that enters into it. We should feel things speed up because things are more important. And there should always be a time element to the script. It should feel faster. So our protagonist has to go back to the communities. And the first thing that they have to do is confess their stumbling block. So it's not enough that they realize their stumbling block and they accept responsibility in Act 3. They must now confess it to the communities, and that's so that the audience knows that they know what the issue is. After that, rallying the communities, you give the Braveheart speech or the speech from Independence Day. And the thing that you have to remember is that whatever that is at risk or at stake, whatever the ambition is for the protagonist, is also at risk for the communities as well, the associated foils. So they have a stake in this as well. You gather the resources, and then you go and you run the obstacle course. We've seen that, right? The protagonist has to go through over hill and dale and break into some place in order to get access. And it seems like they'll almost get caught, but they're doing great. They've knocked out the guard. They've avoided the dog. They've gone under the security beam. And then what happens? The antagonist comes up with a rabid defense. A rabid defense is something that the protagonist had no idea the antagonist was capable of. My absolute favorite example of this has to be from the last James Bond movie, which took the Act 4 and kind of turned it on his head, because instead of James Bond having to break into someplace, he had to literally defend a castle. So gathering his communities and their resources, they had to lay traps in the castle, and they had to find spots where they could shoot people and pick people off. And so what does the antagonist do in James Bond in order to deal with the success? He brings in a military-grade helicopter and starts to bring the castle down around James Bond's ears. So when I say rabid defense, that's exactly what I mean. And your antagonist needs to have this listed on their character creation sheet. It's under the escape plan when you look back at the sheet. So now what happens? Well, the rabid defense forces a resolution of some kind. So we get one final assessment from the protagonist, and then a final gambit. Win or lose, most of the time it's a win. Most of the time they figure it out, but it needs to make sense. But most of the time, in most stories, we like a happy ending, so they do figure it out. And that leads to new reputation. So the reputation that we generally start with is the reputation of the antagonist. In an action adventure, did he live or die? He or she live or die? Then we go on to the character and their relationships to their communities. And then in the final, the 8th bookend, how the character looks to the world at large. So, it is really very important that you drive home the fact that it's the character's learning of the lesson here and its application. How do you know that I learned it unless you show me that you learned it? So show your work here. It doesn't have to be pedantic or easy. It just has to resonate. My name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. This is Writing is brought to you by MJG Story Creation. Go to MJG Story Creation for your free 1-hour story consultation. Get started on turning your story your idea into an epic story today. I'll see you next time.